Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit. The Wye Valley is quite a popular tourist destination and is sort of adjacent to the Forest of Dean. It's quite an inspiring place and has been for various people over the years. So naturally, what I want to do is develop a scenario or perhaps mini campaign, taking ideas from this location and putting them into a role-playing game. What I'm looking for from the listeners is any thoughts on existing RPG material that uses rivers or a river journey or something like that as the source of their inspiration. The first thing that came to my mind was a fairly recent product, Fever Swamp. It's got the idea that I'm thinking of the party moving around in a boat, doing a sort of a point crawl. But what I'd like to know is there anything maybe a bit older going back to TSR products from back in the day, 80s type of scenarios, or anything really? I don't care what system. Maybe get an idea of how other designers have approached this idea, or any thoughts that listeners may have regarding this subject. I've thought of a few films and cinema type things to pick up on tropes, in particular sort of things involving like beasties from the river, monsters that come up. I kind of got in the back of my mind this Apocalypse Now vibe going on, and in those Vietnam War films you always get patrol boats mooching along the rivers, and there's that sort of the suspense of every time you turn a bend in the river, what's going to jump out on you, the various types of settlements that you may encounter along the river. Anyway, I thought it was a subject that's rich for developing.
Saber River is a Beckme module, I think, that came out. The River Loam was like from Braveheart Publishing, which did, I don't know, Domve and all that Pete Spahn stuff. Pretty interesting. There's a pretty big river on Kalmata that the characters use a lot in my game, where they just kind of move along, and I use my random encounter tables to create excitement. And they create excitement on their own, right? Shenanigans and waiting, brother. But I kind of like a River World type thing, a giant river, which is a whole campaign.
Yeah, Saber River. I can't believe I forgot about that. I actually own it. It's CM3, and it's got an underground river in it. And I'm going to have to go back to my books on that one and look into it. But that was a good catch there, Jason. The other one I've also... one of the other ones you mentioned was Kalmata, and I've got that as well. So I can't believe I've missed out both of them.
I'm not able to recall specifically something about rivers. You mentioned swamp, and that reminded me of the new Black Isle OSR campaign setting that was just released a little bit ago. I actually did a section on there called The Screaming Swamp. Not specifically about a river, but before you mentioned swamp, I had another one of my ideas for a series of tables about river terrain and whatnot. So now my mind's cranking on that. So if not today, sometime soon, I'll have something with some random tables about rivers.
I would urge anybody who's interested in this theme that I've kind of thrown some light on here, get over to Larry's site, and there's a wealth of stuff that I'm going to be delving and dipping into for a good little while to come, especially whilst I'm on this river-themed meander, as it were. Right, next up.
Hi, Colin. It's Robert from DM Dad, back from my holiday. It's funny you should mention the Wye Valley, because earlier this year, my family and I were on holiday there as well. It's a beautiful part of the world. I ran a river journey for my full group. So my daughter, her cousins, and their dad. And what I did with that is I had the river kind of go through a war-torn part of my campaign setting, basically a country that's occupied by the army of another country. And they fought river pirates there, but the river pirates turned out to be more like refugees, you know? So there was a bit of a moral choice, like, you know, instead of just being people that you kill, you had to kind of think about how to deal with them. The other thing is I wanted to put some obstacles on the river. So at one point they were traveling upstream, and at one point they came to a waterfall, but they were at the bottom of the waterfall, and they needed to continue their journey by getting somehow up the waterfall and continuing along. And I designed that scenario without a solution. I just left the solution up to them, so that they just had to sit around at the table and think about ways they were going to get their boat and all their gear and everything up the waterfall and far enough upstream that they wouldn't be in danger of being sucked back down the waterfall when they, you know, continued. I also think it's funny you mentioned Apocalypse Now, because as soon as you asked about river journeys, that's exactly where my mind went. It's like D&D Apocalypse Now.
And it got me thinking about waterfalls. I think they're a very dramatic feature that you could work into a river campaign. There's a few tropes connected to waterfalls, such as the hidden entrance behind the waterfall, or the hazard of maybe a pathway that goes behind a waterfall, and you may have to make some sort of ability check to avoid being swept away as you're crossing behind the waterfall. And then of course there's the being pursued down the river by your enemies, and then faced with the waterfall, do you kind of face your pursuers, or do you just take your chances and go over the waterfall?
I don't know any adventures offhand about like river adventures, but for inspiration for reading, I would do the Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. I mean, that whole thing's based off of, you know, these guys going down the river. And of course it was the inspiration for the movie Apocalypse Now. And it's actually a pretty, it's, you know, like most times, it's a better story, literary story than it actually is a movie, even though I like the movie quite a bit. So, but that's really, unfortunately, I don't know any river campaigns. It's tough. Water adventures are always, I find, some of the most difficult to do for various reasons. So best of luck with that, my man. Take care.
I like all that sort of adventuring, and it's sort of it's a bit of an older book, isn't it? So, yeah.
Hey, Colin, I'm a little bit behind, so someone may have already recommended this, but if you're looking for jungle films, Embrace of the Serpent Embrace of the Serpent sounds, I don't know, a little naughty. Embrace of the Serpent is a great film set in the Amazon. I'm also currently watching The Lost City of Z, which seems quite good. Or I think in your country you would say The Lost City of Zed, which in fact sounds much better. Unless I'm mistaken and confusing you with another podcast, you had planned on doing a river campaign early on in your podcast, right? Those are both set on rivers. The Amazon River.
Yeah, I have found a kayak out of a skip, as I mentioned, but haven't got it onto the water yet. But as soon as I do, you can expect to hear more sort of talk of rivers. And in fact, I'm on a bit of a... I'm into a bit of a phase of exploring this idea of ancient routes and old trackways and stuff. I've been watching a Tony Robinson program on TV. It's something that went out on Channel 4 in the UK. I believe it was something like Britain's Ancient Tracks. I think that's the name of it. Each episode, he looks at a different old trackway or route, retravels it and talks about why it's significant. And of course, rivers, they're just another route. Been listening to Audible put out a book, The Old Ways by Robert Macfarlane, and it's talking quite interestingly about how the sea is, or the seas and waterways are full of roots. We just don't always sort of see them as they're below the surface of the water. But if you're an experienced helmsman, captain, sailor, whatever, and you're in charge of watercraft, you are well aware of some of these kind of secret routes, or not secret, but unseen routes, and all that stuff fascinates me, so I expect to hear more in future episodes. And that, as they say, is a wrap, the end to another Into the Pit episode. Thanks to everybody who called in. Big thanks to the pit crew, the folks over on Spike Pit Patreon, and last but not least, a big thanks to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.